Hi everybody, Jennifer Blevins-Smith here with Integral Clinic Solutions, and you're watching my YouTube channel, Navigating the Business of Medicine. Today's topic is about purchasing an established practice. I did a video earlier about absorbing patients from a retiring provider's office, and that was more of aspects to think about when it comes to the patients and that angle, especially if you're an outside provider going to be absorbing the patients and you have your own practice already, or if you're working with the provider who is retiring and going to absorb those patients. But this is coming from an angle or an aspect of you're going to either be expanding your locations and you're going to add another location to your practice, and you want to purchase an established provider's practice in your same specialty, or if you are wanting to start your own practice completely, you've never done it before, but instead of starting from scratch, you want to purchase from someone who is selling their practice in your same specialty. This is going to be about the business side, and if you want to hear or think about things and have tips from the patient's volume, which I encourage, you would want to watch my previous video. So anyway, moving on. There are some things that you really need to do as far as your diligence when it comes to acquiring, purchasing an established practice. I would encourage you, honestly, to go in at least 2 or 3 days and just observe the staff, the workflows, the patients, the volume of patients, how the providers practice, especially if you're going to be absorbing the patients. Of course, patients have the right to choose if they're going to remain in that practice and see a new doctor, which would be you or your colleagues if you're hiring other people, or if they want to go elsewhere. But it's really important just to kind of see the culture, the flow of how things are currently. You definitely want to sit down before that with the owner, and you want to ask some important questions, such as, are you going to and are they willing to sell the tax ID number to you? Because that will make billing a lot easier, I promise. Are you going to hire and retain the existing employees? Are you going to be purchasing the equipment in the office? Is it just the building and absorbing the patients, and they're going to remove all the equipment, all the supplies, all the furniture? Or does that all come with it? There are different ways people do things out there, and so you want to make sure it's very, very clear before you move forward of what is expected of this sell-purchase transaction. You want to make sure you have a lawyer involved. Please do not take this video as any kind of legal advice, any kind of, I watched Jennifer's video on this, so I feel good enough to do this on my own. Don't do that. You want to make sure you involve any kind of professional that should be involved when it comes to inspection on the building before you purchase it, just like you would if you were going to purchase another building. Talk to the landlords if it's a lease, if it's going to be a sublease or a transfer of the lease. Make sure you have lawyers look at all existing contracts and draft up new contracts. Don't do everything on your own. Make sure you talk to an accountant, a CPA that specializes in healthcare. I mean, there's so many angles to take on this, but you want to make sure you're doing your due diligence and you don't get stuck in anything that you weren't aware of. So anyway, sorry, I got on a tangent. So you want to sit down with the owner and go over all of the details, what their expectations are, what they're hoping to do, and what your intentions are. And then you want to make sure that you're going in, you're witnessing the staff, you're witnessing the other providers, if that's part of it, the patients, the patient volume. Now, there's also some other things that they should be very transparent with you about. And if they're not willing to be transparent, to me, that's a red flag. The first thing is I would want to see all of their outstanding AR. That's not just the accounts receivable from the insurance companies, but I would want to see the accounts receivable and the outstanding for patient balances. I would want to see what is their process for sending statements on patient accounts, and if they send patients to collections and how much they've sent to collections on how many patients. I would want to see their billing team and their processes. And if you know somebody who specializes in this area, the revenue cycle, I think it's really important to bring them in and help you evaluate this appropriately, because a lot of it is going to be foreign, or you might understand the basics but not understand enough to ask certain follow-up questions. And you want to make sure that you're doing a deep dive into this, because the financials of a business is the backbone of the business. And if they're hiding anything from you, or things don't look right because they might not be giving you all the information, someone who's used to looking at this stuff and asking the right questions hopefully will be able to detect a little bit of unsuredness before you move further. You want to make sure that you're looking at what is outstanding in their 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 90 plus buckets. That's for insurances and patients. You want to look at what their allowables are, especially if you're going to be absorbing their tax ID and their contracts with the payers. Now, this can be a little tricky, and you're going to need to reach out to the payers each individually, or have somebody do that for you to find out how they would like to do this. Usually there is something in the contracts that says if a practice is purchased, there's a certain way of going about it, but you want to make sure you're looking at those contracts. You need to ask to see all of their payer contracts with every insurance that they bill that they say they're in network with. I would first ask for a list of all the payers they're in network with. I would ask for the percent of patients that have or hold each of those insurances, and then I would be looking at the balances at each insurance of how much is outstanding, how much they've paid, and I would also want to make sure that I'm looking at each of those contracts and looking what those contracts, when's the last time that the fee schedules have been negotiated, when was the contract established, who is their representative that you would contact at the insurance to talk about or ask these questions. This is a process that's going to take you at least 60 to 90 days if you're doing it right. This is a huge investment. This is a huge leap of faith, and you want to make sure that you're doing it the way that you should. The next thing that you need to ask yourself and find out is how they're billing. So you need to look at their most common billed CPT codes. Look at their allowed amounts. Look at their reimbursements. Look at their modifiers. Ask to see how they schedule patients. Look at how long the patient appointments are, what type of appointments they're seeing. What services are they offering that maybe they're not getting reimbursed, but maybe it's not being billed correctly. Maybe they're bundling things together and some things have to be written off, but they're paying for other things. There's so much to look at, and I'm probably totally going over your head and you feel overwhelmed, and I apologize, but that's why it's really important to bring people into this space for you that can help look at this and help give you their expert eyes and input on if they feel this is something worth purchasing or not. The other thing a lot of people overlook is what vendors existing practices use and what are the balances on accounts that the vendors use, because you want to make sure if you do purchase the practice that you are not going to be held liable for any existing balances at vendors, and you want to make sure that you have a good relationship with vendors, especially if you're going to be using an existing tax ID number. So you want to make sure that you get a list of all the vendors that they use and ask for their current balances or invoices to see. I wouldn't just go off of looking at what the clinic is providing to you in their books. I would ask to see the most recent invoice so that you can see purchases, balances, payments, to confirm that what they're telling you they've done, they've done. You don't want to get into something where you owe a lot of money or they won't have a relationship with you because they haven't established a relationship with you as a new owner, just the practice in general by the tax ID, and have to find another vendor for that or be having problems with that relationship right away. You also want to run a report to find out how many patients are Medicare and Medicaid, and this will be in the other reports I spoke to earlier, and it's also in the video I talked about patient population before. But you want to make sure that you're not getting into a situation where you're going to be having a lot of Medicare and Medicaid where the reimbursement's really low and your overheads are really high. I would ask to see the year previous business taxes, and I would want to see all of the financial report rundowns that I mentioned, and then see your current year to date to compare to the year prior and the current year to see if things have improved, if they've gotten worse, if you see any trends that are concerning. I would ask to see the employees' wages and their benefits, especially if you're going to absorb and keep on those employees, and see if it's something that you feel is practical or realistic in their wages. Maybe they're paid too high and you need to figure out a way to even that out. Or maybe they're paid too low and you feel that you should bring them up a little bit higher because they've had an issue with turnover, and maybe that's the issue, is they're paid a little lower than competing specialists or practitioners in the area. Maybe the benefits aren't very good, and maybe you won't be able to provide them with how much their benefits are being paid if they are really good. I mean, there's so many things. Like if they're getting 100% of their benefits paid and they're already paid a high amount, and as a business person you come and you look at this based on the income coming in, and if they're having financial issues, maybe that's a place that needs to be changed a little bit. Maybe, they'll need to pay 50% of their benefits for a little while and keep their wages in order to balance things out. And then if things improve financially, you'd be able to go to 75% coverage and then maybe 100%. But making sure that you're looking at all of that, because the one thing that employees are always nervous about acquisitions is how is it going to affect them directly? How is it going to affect their income and their benefits? Don't overpromise until you can see what they're being paid and reimbursed right now and what their benefits are. Make sure you look at their vacation time or PTO policy, because maybe it's kind of extreme for a small practice and it needs to be changed, so that if anything does need to be changed, you can do it right away before it's purchased, and you can be upfront with those employees to lessen the turnover likelihood that you will have if you purchase the practice. Turnover is going to happen with acquisitions. There's always going to be people who don't do well with change or don't like the changes, and so you want to make sure that you can do whatever you can to lower any kind of rate of turnover, because it's expensive. So make sure you're looking at all of that. Look at the hours of operations, and is it being beneficial to the practice, or are you going to need maybe to change those hours of operation or change the days of operation? Look at the equipment. What is being rented? What is owned? Are those things that are going to be needed by you and your practitioners, or yourself if you're the only one, in what you're going to be offering to patients? Look at the location. Look at the geographic location and find out what's the likelihood of you growing your patient base there. It's great that you're absorbing established patients, but especially if you're in a specialty, you're going to want to make sure that people are coming to you and you're getting new patients all the time. Same with family practice or general practice. You don't want to just keep the status quo of how many patients you have. You don't want to overgrow and overpromise basically to patients and they're waiting forever to see you, but you also want to make sure that as you lose patients, you're gaining patients at the same time, so that you are always kind of growing and being able to maintain what you have. The other thing you need to look at is who is referring to this office already. Do they have really good relationships with outside resources of referrals, or is that something that you're going to have to work on? I would ask to see their referrals list, or the list of people who refer to them, the other providers. Ask about what labs they use, what diagnostic imaging they use, if they have some in-house or not. I mean, that's totally depending on the specialty. But you want to look at those things. You want to make sure that you're getting the most accurate vision of this practice as you can. And the financials are the biggest part of that. But also going in and seeing the culture and what the employees are used to, workflows, how the rooms are set up. Take an inventory if you are going to be purchasing the supplies and the furniture and the equipment. Is there anything that needs to be maybe updated or upgraded once you take over, and anticipating that in the budget? This is like buying a house on steroids, essentially. Is the doctor selling it to you wanting to stay on for a little while to help with that transition? Usually that helps. If they can, stay on for at least 3 months during the transition and maybe work full time for a month and then dwindle down, that would be amazing, because then if you have any questions or you need help finding something, that definitely will be worth it for you in the long run. or if they have a manager that's willing to hang on and stay with you and help with the transition, even if they don't intend on staying long term. How are you going to entice the administration to want to stay with you? Because sometimes in these older established practices, the administration might not be held as accountable as maybe they should be, and they might, I don't want to say run amok, but maybe they've gotten a little bit lackadaisical in their duties or in their due diligence of making sure that other staff members and roles are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you might be exploiting some of that when you're asking for all of these reports and all of this information where they're kind of lacking, and maybe you will realize that maybe they're not a manager you would want to hire, but maybe they would be willing to stay on for a little while to help with that transition. If it's in your benefit, it might not. Maybe they have a personality that doesn't work well with you, or that you don't feel will be a good fit with your envision of what kind of culture you want to establish, or how you want to kind of take the practice in a certain direction. The most important though are the financial reports. There are no financial reports that wouldn't be good to look at. Patient counts, because let's be real, if they have an EMR, most likely it's all going to be recorded somewhere, and if you reach out to the EMR company, even if you can't find the report, either they can create a custom report for you, or they can show you how to run a customized report, and you want to make sure you're looking at all of that. You want to make sure you're looking at patient counts and looking at, when they're busy, when they're slow, times of day, certain days of the week. You want to look at their insurances and reimbursement, like I said, their fee schedules, making sure that they are getting reimbursed what they should be by their contract and their allowed amounts. You want to make sure that you're looking and going deep into those buckets, and is the billing team doing what they're supposed to be doing and chasing down that outstanding AR that's old. Also, reach out to the EMR company and find out what you would need to do for acquiring the new practice, and if there's anything that they can provide to you to help with insight to the practice and how things are set up. And maybe they can be honest with you and they've seen some issues, or they've had some issues they've tried to communicate to the existing management and or owner, and it hasn't been taken care of, and it would make things a lot better in the practice, and it would help with efficiencies. They might be able to share that with you. Use your resources that are there. But again, you might not be able to do it all on your own. You might need to bring in an expert who's good at looking at financials. You might need to bring in your own bookkeeper or CPA, which I suggest, at looking at some of their bookkeepers and CPAs information so that they can ask the questions that they need to, because they are trained and experts in that area for a reason. Talk to their IT specialist about any kind of IT security and HIPAA stuff. And you'll definitely want to ask if they've had any HIPAA breaches or any OSHA violations. You want to look at all their compliance stuff as well. I can't believe I almost forgot about that. That's a huge thing. Look at their compliance, make sure that they're up to date, and that you look at their policies and procedures and their protocol books. It doesn't mean that you have to keep them, but you want to make sure that you're looking at what kind of work will be involved if you do buy this practice, and who's going to have to help you get things to the point where you want them. Whether it means that you just need to change things to your preference, or you need to change things to get to compliance, but you need to look at that, because that's going to give you the realistic picture of who you need to bring in to help you when you do purchase, and if you want to purchase. Sometimes it might be too much work to undo and redo than just to purchase something from scratch and establish it correctly from the beginning. And that's something you have to consider when you're doing this. Once you see everything out on the table, is it going to be cheaper in the long run and more efficient to just start your own practice from scratch rather than trying to take down and rebuild what's existing? If you have purchased an established practice and you have any tips, tricks, FYIs for your colleagues, please leave that in the comments below. If you have questions or if I missed anything, please leave that in the comments as well. Smash the thumbs up button if you enjoyed today's video. Subscribe to my channel. Make sure you check out the previous video about acquiring patients from a retiring doctor, because that information is very applicable to this information as well. Thank you so much for the support, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.